here. Let me pop
Oh,
this up on the screen.
yeah. I mean, it's two things have happened. One is Bolsonaro wasn't really, he tried, but he failed to manage it's a mistake of populists in multiple places and
Yeah.
locations.
Right, yeah. I
He
know you go.
tried to contain the issues related to the lockdown, didn't control regional governments, and kind of went back and forth on how to manage it, and was unsuccessful. I mean, if he'd just taken a hardline Swedish style position all the way through,
Yeah.
but trying to play in between got him the worst of both worlds.
Same
That's
thing with
part
Trump.
one. Part two is he promised a major success on crime and economics, and in part the pandemic and the lockdown response to it crushed both of those things that he was trying to build. And then part three is it now for politicized reasons. Lula was really, the judicial system was politicized. While there were good, legitimate questions about his corruption, the way those cases were handled were Rudy Giuliani style, in like what they're doing in the New York Court of Appeals, were clearly politically corrupted. And so since he has been ultimately found innocent of a lot of those charges, the judicial corruption against him has actually made him more popular now than he was before all of that. And the last component is where Lula is strong is it comes from a left populist perspective. Still populist. It just it happens to be on the left, but he embraces a lot of populism. And in Latin America, a lot of populism leans left because so much of their natural wealth is controlled by foreign oligarchs. And that's why they're, the sort of capital, the right-leaning populism tends to be rooted in security and culture and local entrepreneurialism, but it has limits because it tends to be in bed with the big Western corporate interests that often undermine domestic working class well-being.
Yeah, I would say too. That's exactly when you look at the overlap in the vote. What was the vote share for Bolsonaro's party last time versus what we're seeing now? Where's that coming from? It's that overlap where there's just a lot actually in this country. It's a lot, I think, probably more than in the United States, where there was that Bernie Trump overlap, right, in 2016. And I think in 2020, Trump just took Bernie's voters. Those voters, I think he just took them.
I mean, what you have in Brazil is about twice as many. The ratio to Bernie to Trump type voters is 2 to 1.
Yeah, it's got to be like 2 to 1.
And Bolsonaro was able to win almost all those Bernie type voters last time. Yeah. He's losing almost all of them this time.
Yeah, he's getting crushed this time. And they just been drumming this guy. They've been drumming him since the moment he got in office. Yep. They've been drumming his kids, his sons. You want to follow what I mean by that? Look at Glenn Greenwald's Twitter page. I mean, there's like daily wax of Bolsonaro.
Greenwald, what they did to Trump, they did to Bolsonaro. Yeah. They just had more success because Bolsonaro is not as skilled as Trump in the court of public opinion, wasn't able to achieve some of the results that Trump achieved in terms of delivering on policy promises, but had all the vulnerabilities of Trump in terms of who he appointed, his ability to control what the states were doing, his response to the lockdowns, his mistakes in certain personnel, all of that. He had more limitations. And then Lula's like, Bernie Sanders combined with a Kennedy. I mean, it's a different. He's at a much higher level. Not only are there a lot more Bernie type voters in Brazil because of the legacy of right wing fascism that was strong in Brazil, the dictatorship for over 20 years, killed a lot of people on the left. Was done part of Operation Condor that took over all of Latin America after the mid 1960s for the most part. That embedded American interest, American corporate interest with fascistic elements, including, Operation Condor. The United States recruited Klaus Barbie, the famous Nazi, to go down and train people to do torture camps, embedded them with pedophile rings and other things. You can look this up about a story about where one of the torture camps was a pedophile community from ex-Nazi pedophile community in Latin America. That legacy has continued to hurt conservatism and right-leaning populism in Latin America. Because Brazil, I mean, at one point had a strong right populist movement that Bolsonaro reinvigorated. Argentina with Perón, part of that was right-wing populism, but it got corrupted by its being in bed with Nazi fascists. I mean, tens of thousands of Nazis ended up throughout Latin America thanks to these people. And it's the legacy of Cold War American politics, the Dulles brothers. That's where the devil's chessboard is behind me right there about the Dulles brothers. That's a gift from a local subscriber about the real story behind the killing of Osama bin Laden. It hit Zero Dark 30 is 90% fraud. The CIA had almost nothing to do with it. They're just covering up for their torture and their ineptitude. But I think what we're seeing in Latin America is populism is still very, very strong. You're not seeing any of these centrist, neoliberal, neoconservative, corporatist types, globalist types. None, that's not succeeding anywhere in Latin America, but it's leaning to the left in part because of the recent history, in part because of the political nature, and in part because of the economics of the circumstances down there. Yeah. And last but not least, because of the failures of Trump, you could amplify times 10 for Bolsonaro in Brazil. And that may be a good transition. We're seeing some of the same failures by Le Pen in France that showed up in the most recent regional elections.
Yeah, where was the last? I didn't put that one in. I just had the latest polling from that. But
basically she got crushed.
Yeah.
Now so did Macron. I predicted it. I bet money on Macron winning early on in 2017 at a 4-to-1 rate of return on that bet. But I said at the time, I'm betting on Macron now, and I'll bet against him next time because I don't think he'll ever win. The bigger story out of the French regional elections is that Macron's party is completely crushed.
Yep.
The second story is that Le Pen is in trouble. Le Pen's party is in trouble. I think the results of that election, watch for the French elites to dump Macron in the next 6 months and choose a pro-EU so-called conservative, I think his name is Bernier, to replace Macron because Le Pen has opened a door by trying to tone down the populist portion of her voice.
Yeah, they had an identity crisis. Crisis, Robert. They were trying to run away from the old man. They were just, it's an identity. You can't, I say this all the time. I don't know what other way to convey this to people, but parties, messages, you cannot have conflicting tones, tenures, even messaging platforms, what you stand for at its core. You can't have an identity crisis in the middle of an election. You simply can't do that. And you got to give it to leftists and statists. You got to give it to them. They don't ever.
Oh, yeah. They know how to continually manipulate. The path there has been there for, history gives a clue as to the path, and particularly in France, large aspects of what de Gaulle did give a lot of indicators of how you can be successful as sort of a populist nationalist in France. And that's the path Le Pen should follow. And she's made the mistake that you can disassociate from your father's fascistic friends without disassociating from your populist base. And there was a path forward by embracing de Gaulle style, a kind of French populism could reinvigorate her, especially as being the anti-Macron, with Macron's completely collapsing popularity, which started almost right away. It was in the 30s that, now he's in the 20s, wherever it is. But by not articulating a policy platform, it's the weakness a lot of these populists face is not creating, not many of them have the skill set. Well, none of them have the marketing skill set of Trump. And in order to substitute for that, or even to supplement some of Trump's own weaknesses, is you need architects and engineers to design a policy agenda that can substantively translate populism into actual outcomes. The outside of the foreign policy arena, Trump was very inconsistent in that area. It's still a vulnerability. Bolsonaro mostly failed to deliver, got stuck in the lockdown logic that killed him, even though he tried to fight back just unsuccessfully and inconsistently. And Le Pen is running into the same problem. While disassociating from her father was a key step, the bridge was to embrace a populist path, not to just appease the establishment. And that's where she misread that dynamic, and now her party's in trouble.